set for me, namely expand dual enrollment, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and so, so part of what we're doing across all of the districts, Berlinda and David, is we are encouraging all trustees, all boards to work together, and the COs are doing the same thing, is to look at everything with an equity lens so that we can really place some value and figure out how do we really articulate what our values are about, what our goals are about, and then make sure that we have something in place to kind of move the needle, because we know that this has been moving pretty slowly. So I would think, Erica, one of the things that we would want to do is at least, I think that we should have ongoing discussions anyway, just so we build up to these goals, because I think once we have sort of some goals that really reflect our basic values and standards, it will be pretty easy from there on to continue to then just build upon those. But I just don't think that the board has really had any real in-depth discussion on this.
Well, I think, Linda, can I just say, I mean, you had your January study, your retreat that was focused on it. We came up with the draft goals, and then that's what you all were supposed to talk about in August. So I'm having a hard time understanding how are we going to do that if we haven't been able to get people to talk about goals? So I'm open to ideas, but.
Well, that's why I suggested that we do this ad hoc committee, so that we have a smaller group talking about it that we bring to the larger group. So Berlinda. Unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So I was having some problems, so I had to.
You have to mute either your computer and just use your phone, whichever audio you're using.
Now let's try this again. Is that okay?
Turn the volume on your phone down so that it doesn't play back.
Now, okay. Yes?
Better. Yes, thank you.
Okay. I keep losing signals, so I'm going back and forth. So I probably missed some of what you said earlier. So if I may sound to be asking the same question that you may have already addressed, but I do need to say this. Okay, so originally when we established the goals, not this year, but my experience, and I think one of the trustees mentioned it, that when we have our board goals, we set them so we could use whatever it is that we establish for the superintendent when it's time to evaluate her or him. We can see how well we did, how well she did with the goals that we established. One of the problems that we had with the last evaluation, we did not have anything to measure to see how well Dr. Adrianis did. We all know she did well, but we did not have the parameters. I remember when we set the goals for Dr. Rocha in particular, we said one of our goals the college wants is for us to increase the number of in-district students. Another goal was blah, 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 blah. So we had some parameters by which we evaluated on. So when I see these protocols and all of this, these are good. But unless we have measures, which you so often ask, which we should, I am not sure what is the purpose of this meeting and if that's what we intend to do. Now, that is really where my frustration is.
So the deliverable, I hope that we come out with a complete board discussion, is to set measurements, is to have metrics, measurable goals. So you're right, we didn't. And Erica is also right. We've had a number of discussions, but they really haven't been in depth. It's really been difficult for the board to really sit down as a board and really talk about some of these issues, and then how do we change, maybe what we still have the same values, I think, but how do we change what we're doing, and how do we make our policies more directive, I guess, or more focused, so that we are moving the needle in our districts. And I think that's something that all districts are really struggling with. But I have been really struggling with this with our board for over 3 years, because I have asked for us to have retreats where we have more in-depth discussions on this, and it's just been difficult. So that is why I had suggested that let's move this to a subcommittee to at least begin some of these discussions, and then we can bring it back to the full board, and then it becomes sort of an iterative process. I think that there is just not a lot of appetite of every single one of the 7 board members, elected board members that sit there, to really have in-depth discussions. But I do think that we could have more value added discussions by having a subcommittee at least bring back some of the, have some of these core discussions, and then bring it back to the board as a whole for further discussion.
Sounds
Does that make sense?
good.
Yeah, so this is really sort of the start of it. So when, like, Senator Chen Lao says, well, I hope this moves, there's not a lot of delay. Well, yes, I hope so too, but that's not dependent on the 4 of us who are meeting. The 4 of us are meeting to kind of get the core discussion moving. It's up to the 8 of us really to pass this. So I know, Erica, you have not been on previous discussions with us. So it sounds to you like we are having these discussions, but really, I feel like they should be much more in-depth than we have had in the past. And that has been kind of my frustration for the last 3 years with the board.
So,
Yes. Ms.
so
Brenda.
would you care to give us a guideline of your in-depthness, where you really suggest what is it you want to see us do, so we could start moving the needle if we agree or not? Give us,
Yeah.
enlighten us.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I'm going to enlighten you. I think this has to be a discussion among all of us. What will move the needle? I mean, first, I think we should look at the resolution that we passed on equity and diversity and our commitment. Those should reflect our values. I think we should look at those words. I don't have a problem with John's recommendation that we go back and we take a look at the protocols, and you'll see on page 3 and 4 of those protocols, Berlinda, you and I
I'm
will
looking at
remember those dinner time oath swearings that we used to have. Nevertheless, I mean, they do have some words in them that certainly reflect our values. I think that we, the board members on this call, can continue to have these and kind of focus in on what those values, what are those words and those values that we're willing to hold ourselves to, and to make sure that we are looking at everything that we move forward on moving this diversity and equity needle. I think when we get to the goals, what I'm saying is that's where we really that needs to be done in conjunction with the superintendent. And when we set the goals before, in the past, our past practice had been that the board sets their goals, we set the goals for the superintendent. But I like the idea that San Jose used, is that the goals really should be the same with different actions from the superintendent, different actions from the board. So I'm just putting that out there as a suggestion. And I also agree that part of what we need to do then is to add the metrics so that they're measurable and that we are all accountable to move these goals forward. Yes, Berlinda, you don't have to hold up your hand. It's just us. Just
so okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that we need to set or discuss goals for the board and goals for the superintendent. Now, and I think that's where I'm having a little problem, but now that you bring it out, This is the reason why, again, we go back to the evaluation. Unless we have goals set for the superintendent president, we cannot effectively evaluate her next year.
I agree.
So I guess we're talking about two sets of goals. Now you're suggesting that we bridge them. I'm not sure how, but that's a good way for us to begin our discussion and do what we need to do.
So Berlinda, if you go back, you can look at our past history, and we have, and I think maybe even 3 and 4 years ago, we did set some pretty good goals for the board. I mean, before, I don't know if you remember when we used to have these discussions on the board goals, they were so, I don't know, really, there wasn't much consequence to them. I mean, they were just kind of general statements that, oh, we'll work with our community, we'll do this. I mean, they were barely goals. And then we started to really have more discussions. But, and then somehow we just kind of got away from really having discussions about these goals. But I do think that we can set goals for the board. And I think that, to really have more emphasis, that's why I'm suggesting take a look at the San Jose goals. I don't think that we have to do the goals right now. I do think that, to John's request, let's look at the values first and bring back some recommendations on really having, make sure that these are the, that our value statements are still reflect what we want. And I hope that they, and we should take a look at whether or not they are reflective and have enough emphasis on the diversity and equity component that is now kind of resonating throughout our system. So I think, that's the first step. And I think that we can do that just as the board members. So I don't think we have to kind of drag Erica through this. But I do think.
Can I just make one comment? The San Jose Evergreen board goals are what's known as the ends policies. That is a very specific type of board goals. Usually boards go through significant training to develop their ends policies. And I say that because I chaired the last accreditation team to the San Jose Evergreen District. So I interviewed the board members about their ends policies and how they implemented them and all of that. So one thing to be mindful of is that this is the San Jose Evergreen form is like a fully baked policy. So you might want, I just want to make sure that it's very well, it's an established way of doing things. So that you might want to bring that into this conversation, like how you're going to establish that kind of those goals and how the board wants to view its policies.
Yeah, that's really helpful for me, Erica, because when I talked to the board members in San Jose, they gave me this and they said, this is what we came out with. And I know they've been working on this for 10 years. We don't have 10 years to do this. So I know that they went through a number of iterations and a lot of discussion.
A lot of
training. I know it took them a lot. And they really, over 10 years, they really had to change their board culture to get there. So I don't know what all of the preliminary steps are. And so that's one of the questions I've been asking them. And I do think that one of the things that I thought, excuse me, that I thought would be helpful is, we could have discussions with other boards to see what they're looking at. It's one of the suggestions that's come up in the work groups is that we start to intersect with other districts to look at best practices. So since you did the accreditation, I mean, I think it would be helpful to kind of hear, your take on this. But I don't think that right now jumping into this is where we should go right now. I think
I agree. I just want to make sure that theirs is highly structured, and as you say, the end result of 10 years, and it took a long time. So between now and the time you evaluate me in June, you don't have time to do the ends policies. So right. I think just throwing it out there.
But this is why I think that, Erica, we need to have these discussions with you so that you can help guide us too, because you have so much more experience working through the accreditation process with districts. And you can kind of give us some ideas. Okay, this makes sense, but here's some steps that we need to take. And we need to take these steps together, I think, so that we are really walking hand in hand on this. So, you know, I'm not like committed to one thing or the other. I'm just using these as examples of things that other districts have done. And I do know that San Jose has probably made the most progress, but their intention of 10 years ago was really changing the culture of their district and their board, and they needed to do that.
And they needed to, because they had some big problems.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So,
Training does that
Lee.
look like?
yeah, David, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What, I'm sorry, what kind of training does that look like? I was just curious to know.
Well, it's a wholesale, you know, as you can see from this process from this year, the board met in January, they approved board goals in June, and then they were looking at those board goals in August. The ends policies, the way that they did it is much more, they're much more codified, and they're not like, okay, the board is all going to get together this month and figure out what the goals will be. It's a lot more structured. So I think that today's conversation is probably figuring out how do you get to the point where you structure the board goals in a meaningful way. I think one of the biggest challenges in some ways, just based on 18 months here, is that you all try to be really nice.
Yes,
Board meetings.
I agree with you, Eric.
Try to be really nice, but in the quest to be really nice, you don't engage in a significant amount of discussion. Once in a while you do, but not that often. And so I think that's part of where this is. There's a little bit of discomfort, I think, in, well, what if I think this is important, but my colleagues don't? And so I think in some ways maybe that's why, starting with whatever the board protocols are, that you all need to find a way to feel comfortable about reaching an agreement and agreeing to disagree.
I love that you brought up these points, Erica, because I do really agree with you. We are not having really good discussions and really kind of allowing people to have their opinion and to be able to honor that, just because we're trying to be so collegial. It's like, oh, that person feels uncomfortable, therefore we're not going to do this. And I think I don't think that really benefits us as in really helping us be an engaged board. So yeah, I totally agree with you, Erica. I'm really glad that you brought these things up, because that is sort of how I feel too. So if we agree, let's take a look. What I'm saying is, let's take a look at these protocols that we have and the value statements we have. Let's take a look at the resolutions that we have about these values. And let us, the board members, kind of come together, just the board members on this call, come together first, and let's start to put together and formulate some things that we would bring back as sort of core values, and reformulate some of the statements, and maybe talk about how we have these kinds of engaging discussions so that we can really get issues out on the table. So if that seems reasonable to you, and I would suggest maybe we just meet 30 minutes for every week, for like a couple of weeks, and then we can bring some things back to the board, but have some of these more engaged discussions. I think it's a little early for us to work on the goals. So I think this is an easy one. Berlinda, you don't have to hold up your hand. It's just us. Unmute yourself, though. You do have to unmute yourself. We still can't hear you.
Now you can.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so again, the protocols. Maybe it's my English. Protocols are things that you follow. Goals are what you want to achieve, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Might be a good idea for us to bring forth the goals that we established, that the board set, right? Which is where we're supposed to be having a problem, and see how is it that we got to refine it to make it what we want it to be. Now, the protocols is what the way you do things. That's how I understand it. But
And
I'm
Belinda, the feedback is driving me crazy.
no, what am I doing wrong?
You just have to lower the volume on, I guess it's your phone that's,
Can you hear me?
well, we're still getting that.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, but you have to turn off the volume on one of your devices, either the computer or your phone.
My phone is pretty low.
Alex.
Yeah,
You might
I'm
have
gonna
to,
mute you both, Berlin. Try turning the volume off on your computer and talking only through your phone. Can you do that?
Say it again.
If you turn the speaker off on your computer
yeah.
and
yeah.
only talk through your phone, that
Yes,
might be the best way to
that's
do it.
best.
So turn the audio off on your computer by turning the speaker off.
Yeah, that's much better. You don't have to turn the video off, Berlinda. You just have to turn the audio off.
And then if you need to unmute your phone, you hit *6 on the phone. There we go. Okay. It sounds like you still have your speaker on your computer. I want you to hit the speaker off, like the mute button, not your microphone, but your speaker on your computer.
Okay.
So Berlinda, I think we really focused on, so I hear what you're saying is that we want to get to the goals, and that sort of is the crux, which I think is true. But I think what has prevented us from really having hard discussions on the goals is we don't have maybe better guidelines or better protocols set up so that we can engage in these discussions. So that's why I like the points that Erica kind of brought up is, and this is her observation as just, a 1.5 year superintendent with us is, we're nice people. We're just not having hard discussions. We're not engaging in hard discussions. And it kind of prevents us from kind of doing some more, really kind of evaluating ourselves better. And it's hard for us to evaluate our superintendent when we can't really have these discussions and evaluate ourselves. That's just my thoughts. So Tammy and David, what do you guys think?
Okay, well, let's see where we go from here.
Oh, perfect. You came through perfectly, Berlinda.
Well, I turned off the phone.
I am wondering if we could meet at, like, in my backyard, since it's only 4 of us and Erica could Zoom in. I don't know if Alex needs to be there if we're not on Zoom. Would that work? And it just feels like you can have a better and a quicker conversation face to face than over Zoom.
You just want to have coffee with us. That's what you want.
Yeah.
I'm okay doing it too. And I think, as we're talking about the values, really it just needs to be the trustees. We're talking about our own values.
Right. I don't think I need to be there because these aren't, hopefully they're aligned with my values, but these are your official values, not mine.
Yeah.
And so I think the part where I need to be involved is when you start going with your goals that are then attached to me in some way or another, because I feel like I need to be able to weigh in and say, well, that's an admirable goal, but how on earth are you going to measure whether or not I've done that? Or, for me, it's what are the goals you have in mind? How measurable are they? And do they reflect what's actually being done at the college?
And so, Erica, so one of the reasons I brought up the timeline is by July, you're right. That's when we want to have the goals that we all agree on. But at some point, and I think that we'll start these discussions earlier, but at some point, I think the board as a whole needs to be with you so that we discuss them when we ferret out things. And that's why I was suggesting, like, so we're doing a winter retreat in January. I think it's too soon for us. I don't know, maybe it isn't too soon for us to discuss that. then maybe we put that on the agenda. But my guess is we normally start talking about the goals right around February and March, and then by July, we kind of
Mhm.
have a set that
Right.
we think is what we want to go forward with. So that's the only reason why I was suggesting those timelines.
Right, and that makes sense, because contractually, you have to do my evaluation by no later than June. So ideally, you would have the goals for the coming year identified and talked about during July, because then there's an entire year. Now, looking at the goals that you've already adopted, because you do have goals for this year. Unfortunately, doesn't sound like some people want those goals, so we have to look at that. But you know, at this point, you need to figure out what your timeline is. But I also think you need to figure out if you're not going to utilize those goals from June 2020 for me for the coming year, then you need to come up with criteria, because otherwise I have nothing. You've given me nothing to base your next evaluation on me.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think, okay, so now that I'm hearing you, now I understand where Berlinda's concern is. And so so I was thinking that we would not have a baked product yet until June, and we would just kind of limp along with what we have. And we, it's kind of there's no foul on this. I mean,
Which you can, you just have to figure out how you're going to evaluate me. And what you could say, if you wanted to, was we're going to evaluate based on the goals we have in place. And we're going to agree that in the coming year, we're going to make changes. But you've got to do something, because otherwise I'm floating out here with no guidance. That's why the fact that you all didn't really have the conversation or come to any agreement, even though you have approved goals, when you decided that that wasn't how you wanted to go in August, then that kind of leaves me with no guidelines. I mean, I'd like to believe that I'm doing everything that you would want me to do, and I'd like to believe that you'll have the ability to evaluate me basically according to those general observations or those goals, but I don't think that that's what you ultimately want in the long run.
Yeah, so let me suggest, let us, the trustees, at least take the first step in kind of just coming down with values.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll put the agenda together and then I suggest we meet at least once a week for 30 minutes, and it can be by Zoom, or we could have a longer discussion in Tammy's backyard. You can have it in my backyard. We could have it in Berlinda's backyard. So, let us kind of go forward and kind of put something together that we can agree on just as trustees. And then I think when we are at that point, when we can really have a more informed discussion to bring the superintendent in, because I think that we will be very conscious that we not discuss anything without her presence that would affect her. I think if we can agree to that, then maybe at least we can start taking these first steps forward.
Well, you can agree to things that would impact me, but the bottom line is that nothing you all talk about is agreed upon until the full board agrees.
Sure.
Yeah. So and that's why the point of that is, you don't need to stress about, oh, we can agree or we can disagree about this because I'm not there, because I'll be there when the whole board agrees.
Okay, that's a good point.
That's what I was trying to point out.
That's a good
point. What I would like to suggest, Linda, is that we, you and I and Tammy meet.
And David, right?
And David.
Yes, we sit down and we talk how we want to approach it. I would like us to have the goals that we've already adopted, and then we'll have our discussion. And
okay. I'll make sure that everyone has that ahead of time.
Yeah, exactly. So we could really get an idea of where we want to go and how we want to approach it. And then we will do the other stuff that you have already set up, the Zoom meetings or whatever. Because right now we're like I am still on the goals for the, and you're on the values and on the stuff that we so quickly got rid of that year. So let's just focus.
You're right, Berlinda. I can hear you now. After I heard Erica speak, I can understand now where each of us are stuck a little bit. So let's agree. Okay, if Monday mornings work for people, maybe we could do like a Monday morning coffee over at Tammy's. Let's just do it for the first week and let's see what happens, and then we'll see where we go from there. And then we'll kind of put together how we go forward, the steps of how we go forward, if that works for everyone.
I also love to let other people do the work. And so if there are, like in Erica, as you've roamed around this state and seen community colleges, if you've seen some ways that other boards have put together good goals and a matrix maybe to measure them, why not take a look at those? So it looks like, I mean, I love that we have the San Jose goals, and that's a great start, but just, I don't want to leave any unrecognized if they're out there. Or Linda or Berlinda, no.
Well, I think that we can make a call out. I mean, not that, I'm sure Erica knows because she's done accreditation visits. She'll know lots of them, but I think that we can make a call out if you find a board that you think is moving along. And Tammy, you work on these work groups, so you must be, I'm sure, coming across various districts who can say that they feel like they've moved along. We just took a look at Cerritos. Any of us can come in, can ask for a copy of those goals, or we can just get them right off of their website if we like them, and then bring them in as examples.
I guess there's a difference between having them on a website and seeing them really work and get measured.
Mhm.
Yeah, but so what do you want to bring those? I mean, that was one of the things I said, is we could bring a district, we could meet with another district and have them talk, if there's someone that we particularly like, and
Yeah.
have them talk about the process of what they went through. And then we could intersect in that way. Is that what you're asking?
Let's just start. Let's do our start, and then we'll see which.
Yeah,
direction
I
we-
think we need to just do our own stuff first. If you have something though that you just want to bring to the table, I think that's good. But I think we can start with baby steps first. I mean, it's taken us a long time just to even have this discussion. So yeah, let's have the coffee at your house.
Let's
And
meet at Tammy's house.
yeah,
Coffee
meet at Tammy's house.
That's great. I love
I
it.
don't eat donuts. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
David, does that work out for you, David? I know you have a heavy school schedule. So tell me if that works out for you.
Mondays are perfect for me, yeah. And I work
Monday?
at a coffee shop, so I can bring coffee.
That's great. Maybe we'll just meet at David's coffee shop.
David has a coffee shop. David, you have a coffee shop?
I work at Starbucks.
Oh,
That's okay. Starbucks is great. All
Can I
right.
just remind everybody that you're in a pandemic? Okay.
Yes, I know. We're not going to kiss and
I'm
hug.
just throwing it out there. You're
we
in a pandemic.
will socially distance.
That's
We
right.
are
Oh, yes.
into that.
And next Monday is Yom Kippur, so I can't next Monday.
Oh, you cannot?
Not next Monday, but after that, or Tuesday.
Oh, let me look at my calendar now, Tammy.
No, throwing that little wrench
Miss
in.
Tammy.
Or what about Tuesday at 10:30? Does that?
Yeah, that wrench is called Judaism. Lashana Tova, by the way, Tammy.
Thank you.
Okay, on Tuesday morning, I'm busy. I have a standing accreditation committee meeting. Thank you very much.
Yes, you do.
So we could do it after or on when?
When is it over?
Tammy, you won't have any meetings on Monday at all, or you just don't want to meet in person with people?
No.
No, it's Yom Kippur. She can't have anything. She can't even eat. So no.
I'm not Jewish, so I don't know what that.
No, it's the high holy day. It's the holiest day of the year.
Yeah, it would be the most solemn day. So
Okay.
not that, like, that's the one day, probably. I mean, no, okay.
So nothing on Tuesday morning.
Tuesday, Berlinda, when's your meeting done? When could you?
On Tuesday?
Yeah,
Are you talking about Tuesday?
yeah.
My meeting is from 9:30 to about 10:30.
Oh, what about 11?
Oh, aren't you the quick one? 11 should be good. Yeah.
David, how does that work out for you?
I get off of work at 11:30.
11:30 in the afternoon? Okay,
Morning.
why don't we meet at 1 o'clock? We could just do it by Zoom for this one. We don't have to meet in someone's backyard. It'll probably be 95 degrees anyway.
Hmm.
Okay, let's just meet by Zoom on this one, and thereafter we can
Okay.
figure out if someone's backyard is open.
Okay. So we're talking about Tuesday? Linda?
Tuesday at 1, does that work out?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
So it's really just us.
Okay.
So besides the materials that Mary sent out today, take a look at those. If there's anything else that you want.
Make sure we get those boards those goals that we adopted. I would
Yes,
like-
right. That's the other document. But if there's anything else,
That's
you know,
enough.
let's just kind of throw that on the table. Okay, so we'll have Mary set up a 1 o'clock then on Tuesday.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, guys. I know this was even a hard discussion, wasn't it?
The beginning of many.
But does that seem clear to everyone? I mean, as clear as we could be on this right now,
Mhm.
on what the goal is to kind of go forward and at least start building a culture where we can have more engaged discussions.
Yeah, and I think we definitely lose out on that through Zoom.
Yeah, we do. But we'll just do one more Zoom, and then thereafter we'll figure out how we can kumbaya some other way. Okay.
Good.
So not to take up Erica's time either on this, we'll just kind of hopefully move forward and we can come to some decisions, and then we'll start talking about the hardcore goals.
But you all are having this meeting, right? It's not me.
Right. Not
Okay.
you. Yeah, unless you want to be there and have coffee with us.
No,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
Have some relevant piece of information.
Well, I think that's the thing is, it sounds like you all want to have this conversation. I mean, I assume that you won't develop and decide upon set in stone goals and then come and deliver them. But it sounds to me like you all need to have a conversation, and it would probably be easier to have it without me.
Yes. Although we love you, Erica, I do agree. I think this is really about the board figuring out how we have these kinds of conversations.
Yeah. I can't help you with that. That's
I know. We can barely help ourselves. Okay. All right. We'll see you guys at 1 o'clock.
Okay,
All right. Bye.
bye.